After many requests, we are covering mobility for Jiu Jitsu today. And there's probably a bunch of requests because you guys understand more mobility means more strength through a greater range of motion, which equates to better performance, easier learning processes because many of these techniques require some flexibility. You also probably understand that better mobility keeps you safe. So without further ado, let's jump in. The most troublesome body parts that I've noticed from my own experience and viewing others in the 9 years I've been training Jiu Jitsu would normally be back, shoulders, and hips, specifically the hips. Nobody trains their hips, hardly anybody trains their hips, and we can develop what's called a rock hip. So we're gonna go through each body part, and I'm gonna give you stretches that not only are gonna help with your mobility, but because we're training under tension, which is what Jiu Jitsu is, you will grow in strength even in the depths of those increased ranges of motion, which will in turn make you more problematic for your opponents to deal with. It'll keep you safer, like we mentioned, and it's gonna overall make you a better Jiu Jitsu practitioner. The first one I wanna cover is the guard sit. Now, as you see me sitting here, this is normally how we have new people in the Jiu Jitsu gym sitting. And this is fine, there's nothing wrong with this. It can be a little uncomfortable for you if you haven't done it before. But essentially what we're doing here is we're training ourselves to sit like this when we're in guard. And I'm not a big fan of that because my center of gravity is a little bit higher. When I'm sitting in guard, I want my center of gravity as low as possible. The higher I am, the easier I am to sweep, the easier it is to take me off balance and hit a submission. So I picked this one up from Helson Gracie probably about 8 years ago. And what you're gonna do is when you're sitting in guard or when you're watching your instructor teach class, maybe he's showing a move, you can sit in a proper guard sit. So we're gonna widen our base a little bit. And from here, what you're gonna see is that I'm gonna try to drop my butt below my heels. And if I flip around, this is how I was sitting before, where I was sitting with my butt on top of my heels. What I wanna do is open up my base and drop my butt down as low as I can. So I'm sitting between my heels. Now, my center of gravity is a little bit lower here. I have a wider base, so I'm gonna be a lot more difficult to take to one side or the other. I'm a lot more stable here, right? Now, this is a little bit more uncomfortable, but this just means that you need to work on it a little bit, right? Like I said, you're watching your instructor teach a move, sit like this, proper guard sit. Maybe you're at home watching TV. You don't have to lounge in the recliner if you want. You can sit down on the floor in a proper guard sit. All of these stretches moving forward, and including this one, really only need 30 seconds of exposure or practice before you move on to the next one. This is not something that you have to sit in for 10 minutes. You can keep it quick and keep it moving. Next, we're gonna hit our hip flexors. Now, the reason I like to do hip flexors is because with greater range of motion in my hip flexors, I can create a larger gap between my lead leg and my back leg, which really becomes helpful in passing. So I like to start in this lunge position and I push off my back knee so that my front leg can move forward. And at the same time, I'm trying to push my hips forward, and we should feel a stretch in this region right here, which would be your hip flexors. Now, once we can increase our range of motion here, which, you know, I see a lot of new people really struggle in this one, guard passing is going to become a lot better for you. How effective do you think you're going to be at guard passing if you have a shorter range of motion? If I can only create a shorter gap between my legs when trying to hit a guard pass, you know, it's going to be easier for my opponent to trap my back leg on the way out. If I can leave this trail leg a little bit longer out and I can pull my leg through like this rather than leaving a 90-degree angle here, right? I can create almost like a rope that I'm dragging. This is a lot harder to hold on to, and it makes me a little more athletic. And as we train through Jiu Jitsu, right, you're gonna be getting stronger in a deeper range of motion. This will translate really nicely to your guard passing game in Jiu Jitsu. And always make sure that we're doing both sides of the body. We don't wanna stretch one side. We wanna do both so that we're balanced and even. This next one is called the plow pose. Now, if you've ever been stacked and you have your lower body folded over top of your upper body and you feel uncomfortable here, I mean, truly this can be an uncomfortable position for just about anybody. But if you have a greater mobility or range of motion in this position, it becomes much more manageable, right? I've gotten people to submit to stack passing, where you fold their lower body on top of their upper body and then drive into them. Some people just don't have that flexibility. So we're gonna work on that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start out on our back, and the whole goal is to get my feet on the mat behind me. You should feel this one throughout your whole entire back, probably from low back all the way up to the top of your neck. And as you can see here, I'm rocking to the left and to the right. I'm trying to simulate certain positions that I could be stacked in, because we're very dynamic in Jiu Jitsu, and it's unlikely I could be stacked in one symmetrical spot. It could be canted off to the left or to the right. So you want to make sure that you have that mobility on all sides, right? Again, we're only holding these for 30 seconds, so bear through the pain. Don't push yourself too hard, but test your limits. You have to remember that the human body is very resilient, but also very adaptive. It won't adapt unless you give it a big enough stimulus. And once you do that, you'll see great change. Next up, we're gonna cover the pigeon pose, which is great for your hips. Now, if you're someone who struggles with hitting triangles because your hip flexibility is lacking, or maybe even some of you more advanced guys trying to get into rubber guard, this is gonna be good for you. Now, rubber guard is definitely a position that you can adjust your own body and achieve with less flexibility than you probably think, but more flexibility is never a bad thing. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start almost in a push-up position. I'm gonna bring either leg forward, try to put a 90-degree bend, or maybe probably a 75-degree bend in that leg. Once I'm set, I'm gonna rock my weight back and lean into this hip here. Sometimes if I really want to make this difficult, I'll reach down and grab my foot and rock this up, and then I'll lean into that. And so you guys can see it from the other side. We're right here. See how I'm walking my back foot out? Boom, boom. Drop my weight down. And if you really want to make it difficult, drop your head to the mat. And we're gonna sit in this for 30 seconds, each side, right? Again, stretching this right here, because many of us come into jiu-jitsu with this part of our hips very tight. So if I were to simulate launching a triangle choke from here, right? Getting my hips off the ground, putting the shoelaces of this foot into the leg pit of this leg. Boom, right? There is some rotation that's happening with this leg. And if I have less range of motion in this way, it's going to be a lot more difficult to lock this up, especially if I'm trying to triangle someone with bigger shoulders. So utilizing the pigeon pose is a great way to help open up those hips to help you better perform on the mats. All right, next we're going to cover the 90-90 hip switch. Now, I really like this one because it's going to show you exactly where your hips are lacking. Now, you may not be able to do the entire motion. You may be able to do all of it except for the very end. Pay attention to where your trouble spots are, because that's where you can focus a lot of your time and attention to helping open up your hips more. So we're gonna sit almost in a fashion where we're creating two 90-degree angles with our legs. It almost looks like an S to me, right? We're gonna sit here, and for the purpose of the video, I'm going to turn this way. And what I'm gonna do without putting my hands on the mat is I'm gonna rotate my knees over to this side. Boom. Boom. And that's right where my sticking point is. I can feel coming to here, I have some difficulty, so I need to work on that section. But for the purpose of this drill, try to keep your feet on the mat and rotate through. So once you're able to determine where your sticking points are, like for me, I know it's when I'm dropping down into this side. What I'll do is I'll sit here while I'm watching class, or maybe when I'm at home watching TV, and I'll post my hand either on the mat, the floor, or even my own knee. And once I get to a point where I've built up enough mobility, I won't touch it all. You can either cross your arms, hold your hands out in front of you, whatever it may be. And you're gonna lean into this. You're gonna feel this stretching your groin area, and you're gonna feel a little bit on the outside as well, just because it's compressing. So once you do 30 seconds of the hip switch back and forth, you can then find that problematic zone and sit in it and hold that for 30 seconds. And if you're gonna do that, you might as well do the other side as well. And you can probably tell that I'm a lot more comfortable here. This is my flexible side. I can almost fall asleep sitting up like this. It takes no effort for me to stay here. While the other side, I do have to activate my core to keep myself up. So this one specifically is gonna be really good for your open guard. So the more you can open up your hips and you're growing, the better you're gonna be in playing this game, right? Being mobile and being able to flip yourself around in case someone's trying to maybe cartwheel pass or whatever it may be. Swimming your legs, catching the biceps, launching triangles. Next, we're gonna cover the lying crossover stretch, which is gonna be really good for increasing mobility between your lower body and your upper body. So think sweeps, right? Think any kind of twisting movement where in Jiu Jitsu, maybe your lower body is isolated, locked on your opponent like in guard, and you have to twist your upper body. Or maybe you're anchoring with your upper body and you have to twist with your lower body. The more range of motion you have in a twisting fashion, the more problematic you're gonna be for anybody you're dealing with, whether that be sweeps, escapes, whatever it is you can think of. This is gonna be really good for Jiu Jitsu performance. So as you can see, I brought a weight out here. This is not something that you absolutely need. I like to use it because my body tries to fight back in this position. So I'm gonna show you how it looks, and you're gonna see exactly what I mean. So I will start off lying on my back. I'm gonna pick a leg, pick it up, and kick it over. You can see there's already a twist in my body. Now what I'm gonna do is take the opposite side arm and reach it back this way. And as you can see for me, this is problematic because as I drop my hand down to the mat, my leg begins to rise. So what I'll do, and sometimes if I wanna get crazy with it, I'll use two weights, one for my hand and one for my foot. What I'll do is I'll grab onto this weight here, pinning or isolating my hand to the mat, and then I can take my other hand if I need, grab my knee and force this down. And I can feel this one very deep into my lower back and also in the front of my core as well. And just so you guys can see it from the other angle, we need to switch sides anyways. I pin my hand over here. This leg comes up, drop this over. Oh, this one's even worse, to be honest. Grab my hand, back of my knee. Ooh, I don't know if you heard that, but I got some good pops in there. And we're gonna hold this for 30 seconds. You have the option to either leave your foot straight out or bend your foot back. I feel that I get more of a twist with my leg extended because there's more weight out at the end of my leg this way. Last but not least, we're gonna cover our shoulders just because the shoulder is a complex joint. It's one of the more likely joints to get injured when we're new to Jiu Jitsu, and really, it doesn't matter if you're new or not. Like, the shoulder is just susceptible, and it's obviously a joint that is often attacked. So we need to make sure that we're giving ourselves the mobility it deserves. A couple things we're gonna do: the wall chest stretch and the upside down cactus stretch. So first off, nice and simple. I guarantee you probably all have seen this before to some degree. Face the wall, plant our hand. Rotate our torso away from the wall, almost trying to get my sternum perpendicular to the wall here. And I'm gonna sit and hold this for 30 seconds. Now, I do get a great pectoral stretch from this, but this is also really good for the shoulder joints. The pec connects into your shoulder, so you need to make sure that we're being mindful of that. And just so you guys can see it on the other side, we'll plant the hand, lean into the wall, turn away, and feel that stretch. It's a good one, probably one of my favorites. Now, the upside down cactus stretch is pretty similar. We're just going to start like this, with our arm at a 90-degree angle with our hand pointed down. And we're gonna lean into that. And I feel that more in the front and even the top of my shoulder, maybe a little bit closer to my AC joint where my collarbone connects to my scapula. Ooh, that's a specific part of the shoulder that does get injured a lot in Jiu Jitsu. It's a shoulder separation. When your collarbone pulls away from your scapula or your scapula pulls away from your collarbone. We want to be really careful of that one. Obviously, you know, using good training habits, being with good training partners, all of these things matter, but you need to help yourself as well. It's good to help your training partners. Help yourself with some mobility training. And just keep in mind that even though there are many more options for stretching your shoulders and even all the other body parts we talked about, it's good not to overwhelm yourself. You need to establish a foundation, a starting point. So if you don't have a routine, or maybe you have a routine for mobility and it's just, maybe there's no structure, you kind of slapped it together, maybe you're just looking for something new, it's good to switch it up. It's good to try new things. But especially you guys that aren't doing anything, you're just relying on jiu-jitsu, it's good to add this stuff in. And don't get me wrong, jiu-jitsu will help with your mobility over time. Remember that the biggest part about working on your mobility is being strong through the entire range of motion that your body is capable of. And in doing so, you become more efficient with your movements. But not only that, you keep the joints safer, you keep yourself safer, you're gonna be healthier, you're gonna be able to train for a longer period of time, you're less likely to be injured. So mobility is super important. I appreciate you guys that requested this one. If you have other stretches that you're doing, or maybe you have certain body parts, certain areas of your body that are problematic for you, I wouldn't mind doing a part 2 of this, because mobility is so important. It's not necessarily some of the more sexy stuff of jiu-jitsu, right? Not everybody wants to see mobility, but if there's enough of you that want to have a part 2, I'm more than happy to do it. So drop your comments below. Like I always say, I'm not the only teacher here, and I appreciate you guys dropping your knowledge. With that, you know how we like to end them. Sometimes backwards, always forwards. I'll see you in the next one.